the day everyone became giants. In the tiny town of Willowbrook, everything was perfectly normal. Kids played hopscotch on the sidewalks, squirrels scampered through trees, and the mayor, Mr. Finch, spent his afternoons watering the flowers outside the town hall. But one morning, something very strange happened. At exactly 7:02 a.m., a strange buzzing filled the air, like a mix of a bee's hum and a radio static. Mrs. Applebaum, who was pouring tea, noticed her cup had suddenly shrunk. She blinked twice. Was she seeing things? But when her teapot looked as small as a thimble, she gasped and ran outside. It wasn't just her teapot. Everything seemed smaller. By 7:10 a.m., everyone in Willowbrook realized the truth. They hadn't grown by a few inches, they were giants. Imagine the scene. People burst out of their houses, towering over their own homes like friendly giants from storybooks. Mr. Finch, who was known for being short, found himself scratching his head on the top of the town's biggest tree. And little Lucy, who had been small enough to ride in her brother's bike basket, was now so big that the bike looked like a toy under her giant feet. The town erupted in laughter and surprise. Kids chased after cars that now looked like tiny matchbox toys, and teenagers dared each other to hop over entire houses. Even the town's biggest building, the library, barely reached up to everyone's knees. But being a giant had its challenges too. Mrs. Applebaum tried to make breakfast, only to find that her spatula was now no bigger than a toothpick. Mr. Finch's favorite watering can was so tiny that it took him about 50 pours just to water one tulip. And don't even get started on the chaos at Willowbrook Elementary School. All the students sat in the playground, legs stretched across the yard, as their teacher, Mrs. Butterfield, attempted to teach giant math. "All right, class, if you were normal size, how many bananas would it take to make a snack for a giant?" she asked, holding up a banana that looked more like a toothpick. "A million," shouted Max, who was now so tall he could see all the way to the next town over. When it came time for lunch, the whole town gathered at the park. Chef Tony, from Willowbrook's diner, tried to feed everyone. He was famous for his giant-sized burgers, but even his biggest creations were no match for the hungry giants. So, with the help of all the kids, Chef Tony whipped up the town's biggest pancake using a cement truck as a mixing bowl. It was a sight to see. The pancake was so big it covered the park, and everyone had a piece the size of a dinner plate. After lunch, the kids had the most brilliant idea yet. They decided to make a giant parade. Each kid marched down Willow Street, stepping carefully over fire hydrants and lamp posts, carrying tiny pets on their shoulders like superheroes with sidekicks. Lucy picked up her dog, Buttercup, who barked like a little squeak from high above the town. Suddenly, a worried shout rang out. "Where's Benny?" Benny was the youngest kid in town and loved hide-and-seek more than anyone. But being a giant made hiding a lot trickier. There weren't many places big enough to hide a 10-foot-tall kid. The whole town searched high and low, peeking over rooftops and under bridges. Finally, they found him curled up in the bell tower of the old church, snoozing away. Benny explained that he'd tried to hide in a tree, but the branches were way too small for his giant size, so he picked the bell tower instead. As the sun began to set, everyone sat down together in the town square. They stretched their long legs out, which nearly touched the town's edge, and looked up at the stars. Mr. Finch cleared his throat. "Well, it's been quite a day, my giant friends. Tomorrow, we might be back to our normal selves, but we'll never forget this giant adventure." At exactly midnight, the buzzing sound returned, softer this time. And, just as quickly as they'd grown, everyone began shrinking back down. By morning, the town looked just as it had before. Houses were houses again, bikes were big enough to ride, and breakfast spatulas were back to spatula size. But now, when the people of Willowbrook gathered in the park, they had some amazing memories, and some pretty big stories to tell. Little Lucy, with her dog Buttercup, often pointed at the bell tower, giggling, "That's where Benny hid when we were giants." And from that day on, any time someone in Willowbrook had a big idea, they'd say, "Go big or go home," just like the day we were giants.